All right, welcome everyone to the webinar today on telehealth. I am Dr. Brett Kestenbaum, co-founder and CEO of Covalent Careers and one of the co-founders of New Grad Physical Therapy as well. Give me a second here.
Yeah.
There we go. I just had the YouTube pulled up on the back end so I can answer any of your questions that you have for us today. And I'm here today with Rob Vining. Rob is one of the co-founders of PT Live, digital.physio and telehealthpt.com. Today, Rob's going to really be talking to us about telehealth. It's a huge topic now, tons of people interested in it. It's something that is really just coming about and becoming popular in the PT space. It was big in the space for physicians for a while now, but now it's really starting to pick up steam in the PT space. And actually, Rob is one of the pioneers of telehealth for us. So really excited to have you on today, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I really appreciate being here, man. Always happy to talk about it.
Yeah, and for everybody in the audience, if you have any questions for us, just shoot us a message on the YouTube live here, and I will be able to get those questions answered for you at some point. Just bear with me. It might not be exactly when you ask the question, but those questions will be answered. If you can't join us for the entire show here, you can always catch it on YouTube at any point after we're done here. So Rob, just to kick things off, really, tell us how you got started in telehealth.
Yeah, so story goes. So I've told this, these are one of the stories that you tell like over and over again, right? And you always have to kind of scratch your head and go, am I telling the same story? Because it just gets to some point, 15 years later. So whenever I was first getting into PT school, I wanted to utilize technology, and the professors I was interviewing with were like, oh, EMR systems. And I was like, no, like virtual visits, seeing people. And they just, had a chuckle, and they're like, no, that's not going to happen, but good try, maybe in the future. So looking at that and getting out of school a couple of years later, and this was back in late 2004, I had trained in the McKinsey system to where you really didn't have to touch a patient the first visit. It was kind of one of those frameworks where you try to keep your hands off and you want to empower the patient as much as possible. So that was one of those instances where it really had a light bulb moment where I'd see people, they would get better. I would never touch them, and then they would go away. And again, I never had to put my hands on these people that were getting better, 3, 4, 5 visits in. And I figured from my clinicals to actual practicing with a license, I figured that was a good time to invent something and to create some sort of a digital practice. So I created digital physio. We'll talk about that later. So I created directpt.com. And that was right out of school. And I started seeing patients pretty much on boats and yachts. And it was a lot of people that were out to sea. They had satellite internet, but they didn't have the capability to come back on shore and get seen for their medical issue. So I put some things in the top of my title bar, online physical therapy. Google surfaced right to the first page in 2 or 3 months. And I started seeing patients that way. So that was back in 2005, where there was, not the best internet. The webcams were less than to be desired, so it was very pixely, but we got the job done, and that's where it started. And so kind of went into probably 2 or 3 years of doing that. And then Google tanked my rankings, went from like page 1 to page 12 overnight. And so that kind of took all of the SEO and the easy non-marketing strategies I had used, because I literally didn't market. And just decided to jump right back into the clinic work, using hands-on, using the methods that I was learning, going to lots of conferences and continuing ed. And then about 5 years ago, started really getting back into it again. I'd always kind of dabbled in it with those patients that were, 2 hours away and driving in to somewhere where I was working. It just didn't make sense. And I would say, why don't we just do this virtually? Had to explain, but still was able to see them and get the job done. And then about 4 years ago, crafted ptlive.me, which is a text telehealth and scheduling software, and then really started educating the PT profession on telehealth, because I kind of thought everybody else was going to get into this faster, and nobody did. So the more I explained, the more it went from questioning and saying, well, how could you possibly do that, to more and more people seeing it as an answer to the patient population that's asking for it, to make things more convenient, and just to make care easier for those patients to access from wherever they are. So that's kind of leading us up to where we are now.
Excellent. Yeah, and that really allows us to dive into this next question: is how can people get involved in telehealth today, whether they're new grads or seasoned PTs? What is that mode of entry for them?
Yeah, usually it is number one, knowing how you're going to apply it into your practice. So you want to see, okay, if it's just a solo practice that you're going to do, and maybe you're just a cash pay clinic, you're doing mobile therapy and going to patients' houses, or you have some sort of setup where you do have a cash pay brick and mortar clinic, you can implement that fairly simply. You just need to make sure that you're not in the state of Delaware. That's the number one thing because Delaware is a little weird. You cannot perform in Delaware direct evaluations or reassessments or discharges via telehealth. But the majority of everywhere else, there is either no information in the Practice Act for your Physical Therapy Practice Act for your state, or they have very wide and broad regulations saying that you can do this. So nothing about it is really putting the handcuffs on it. It's just learning and starting. That's the biggest thing.
And you were just describing cash pay practices. Is there also an insurance model that you can get into as well, or is it right now? Is it just cash pay?
Yeah, you can use insurance if you're in a parity state. So a parity state is one of those states where certain regulations in that state says insurance companies that are covering their constituents have to pay the same that they would pay for an in-clinic visit for a telehealth visit. So there's some extra hoops you have to jump through, but it is possible to get reimbursement. Medicare does not reimburse for evaluations or treatments or our normal CPT codes. They will reimburse for remote patient monitoring, which some people are trying to dip their toe in and try and dabble in and figure out how that model could work. But the word on the street is in the next year and a half, 2 years, we're going to have all the codes we need to be able to utilize insurance and distribute our services through systems like this for telehealth.
Now, is there any way that PTs that like really don't want to own a business or be an entrepreneur can get involved with telehealth as well, or is it right now? Is it really just something for people who have established practices or have that entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, there's a combination of both. And what we do, so one of the avenues that we do, myself, my co-founder slash wife slash genius of everything that holds everything together, right? And our developers, we actually walk people through our telehealth physical therapy residency, and we take them from like absolutely nothing to having a full independent solo practice. So their overhead is nothing except our development of their practice. And then we just kind of step away, which still kind of blows the doors off some people. They're like, you're not going to take a percentage. Like there's nothing you're going to take after. And I'm like, no, why would I? You're going to do the work. We just wanted to make it functional, make it super efficient, and then let you get on with it. So that is one way that we're helping some people do it.
Let's go into that a little bit further because that intrigues me as well. And can you just walk us through an example of maybe what that looks like so people can have that visual image of what it may be like for them to get involved?
Yeah. So just the basic summary of how to get started is number one, you need to have an idea of your practice act, like I was referencing before. Kind of after that hurdle's cleared, you need to figure out what sort of business structure that you want because you are going to be running a business. So most states will have like a PLLC or an LLC. I always suggest people get like an hour of legal consultation to get things set up and make it easy to where you don't have to backtrack and do it all over again. But then it's just picking a domain name, do something that is going to be more or less telling the patients online physical therapy. Don't utilize the word telehealth with the patient population because they really don't understand it quite yet. But just like online food delivery or online anything, if you say online and then you attach, our profession, they're going to
Mhm.
go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Telehealth kind of gets a scratch of the head and kind of, the dog that doesn't understand something looking at you funny. But once you pick your domain name, you can easily make a system. We help people craft their systems in this. It's a really easy graphical user interface called Wix, and it's a website builder, and it has scheduling, payment can get set up. You can hook it into a G Suite account, which you can make HIPAA compliant. And so it's fairly simple to take all the blocks and use it like Lego and just craft and form an entire telehealth business fairly simply. I'd say if you wanted to do it by yourself, you could look at YouTube, find the videos for it, look at anything that you're wondering about or having questions about. You could probably do it in a couple of weeks. I mean,
Now,
that's
Yeah, now Rob, we have Rakhi Singhal was asking, how about Canada? Is Canada a place where we can have telehealth as well?
I believe so. I don't think that there are any specific rules or regulations that prohibit that. There is a colleague that we have up there. Cloud.physio is their domain name. And Dan and I have spoke several times about this, and that's never come up, I don't believe. So I don't think that there is anything in Canadian Physical Therapy Practice Acts that I've heard of. Again, always just download the PDF and just do a Command F and search for telehealth or electronic treatment or anything that would kind of bring up those key terms. So you don't have to read the whole Practice Act, and that'll let you know right away.
Now I have a question here from Austin Palazzolo. Do you need your license in the state that the patient is located if your clinic is in a different state?
Yeah, good question. So that brings us back to this really gray area that is going to have to be parsed out in the next couple of years. But as of right now, in the United States, you need to be licensed in the state where the patient is physically in. So if you have a clinic that's in a different state, as long as you have an active license in that other state where the patient is physically located, you can see that patient.
Excellent, very good. Now we have Kindle Wilbur is asking, what is a G Suite account? So can you just take us through a little bit more tactically, like the mechanics of setting these things up as well? That might be very beneficial for people here.
Yeah, definitely. So if you just go to Google and you type in G Suite, so the letter G and then SUITE, you can do it separate or all together. It's going to pull up Google's business account where they will actually just give you email, calendars, something that's very similar to basically it's Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Storage, and you can have all these different technical software tools that are specific for your business. Now, that's going to include having your business name like rob@ptlive.me instead of rob@gmail.com. So if you're going to start a professional company in an organization, you want to have your domain name in your email. And so that's one part of what G Suite does. But you can hop into the admin very easily. And at the very top part of your G Suite account, you can type in HIPAA, HIPAA, and that will bring up a little link to click and it will walk you through the process. I think it's 3 or 4 clicks and you'll have HIPAA compliance inside your G Suite account. So it's very simple to do.
Are you familiar with any ways that PTs that are actually looking to get into this, is there anyone that can help them out with this stuff, setting up the G Suite? Now, I know that you just really even laid it out step by step there, and it's fairly simple. But a lot of times, people still have a challenge with these things, and it still can be a little bit scary to implement those things on their own. So is there any services or anyone that you know that can help out with the setup of essentially everything that they'll need?
Yeah. So we do that at telehealthprime.com. That's another arm of our service. It's more the higher end professional. But I always tell everybody the cheapest way to do it is to get into our telehealth physical therapy providers Facebook group. There's I think there's even more than 2,500 now. I was going to say, I think we're getting close to it. So it's all physical therapists and a few physical therapy assistants, but you can use that as a massive resource. And you can ask a question in that group and somebody's going to answer you probably within 10 minutes on how to actually get all of these small little details accomplished. And a lot of people, like myself included, I'll go in there and just do a video walkthrough to show people exactly how to do it. But that group is vital to get into, to surround yourself with other physical therapists and other physios from around the world that are already doing physical therapy via telehealth, or they're wanting to get started just like you. So I would say find that Facebook group and get in there and surround yourself with like-minded individuals.
Very cool. And for everybody listening, we can add any of these links to the comments after we're done here. I don't want to just sit here typing out for you. Yeah. So we can add those links in later, and you can always revisit back to the video to find any of those links as well. Or you can just email either of us and we can get in touch with you, and we'll have our information readily available for you at the end of this conference call as well. Now, diving into a few more questions here, we were talking about practice acts, but that kind of falls into that same category of, hey, as PTs, we should probably be able to know how to like look through our practice acts and stuff. But can you walk through the steps of how people can do that in each of the states that they'd like to practice in?
Yeah, definitely. So one very good idea is just to go and look at the physical therapy board of that state that you're either already licensed in or that you're looking to obtain licensure. And then if you simply Google like Texas Physical Therapy Board or, New York Physical Therapy Board, you're going to have that as one of the first links. And then you're going to be able to, I would say every single state board is going to have either a search feature or they're going to have a Practice Act link easily accessible. And so the majority of the time, if not every single time, um, I think somewhere like maybe Montana or somewhere has like a series, a Google sheet with the list of all of the physical therapy in their state. But otherwise, it's going to be a PDF document that's going to allow you to search that and download it, and then look through and see if there's any specific language about your state specific to telehealth and online physical therapy.
Got it. And for all of you that don't know, Covalent Careers, we're a career development company. And now that Rob's mentioning this and I'm thinking about it, I can talk to our content team. I see Casey Coleman over here. So maybe we can put together a resource for people that they'll be able to just go to a central resource and just look up telehealth and state and make it super simple for people on that end of things.
Perfect, man.
So moving on to more questions here, I see Catherine Coleman asking, I want to bring a telehealth presence to my region, but not sure I know what steps to follow. Do you know of any mentorship opportunities for someone who wants to get started but needs more guidance?
Yeah, I would definitely hop in that Facebook group. I'm probably going to say that at least 3 or 4 more times to these answers. Myself, I usually, if people get into that Facebook group and they kind of get stuck, I'm very free and open with my time. So if you hop into that group, you'll probably stumble across my scheduling app, which is actually, it's like an artificial intelligence scheduling app. Makes it very simple for me. I just discovered this like 2 months ago. But the majority of the time, people are shocked that I will just give them an hour of my time. And they're like, how much does this cost? What can we talk about? And I'm like, it's free, whatever you want to talk about. So like today I did 2, yesterday I did 3. I mean, each day I'm probably talking to people at least between 2 and 5 hours about this and how to get them started. And usually within an hour, we can cover the majority of stuff that you're going to need. It's not a pitch. It's not anything to do with any of our products other than like giving you PT Live for free, because we do that with all the solo digital practice owners. We just give them PT Live and get them started. But other than that, feel free to pick my brain, but hop in that Facebook group. You're going to find every answer. And if you can't find any of the answers, post it. Somebody's going to look it up, if not me first, to do that, to answer you.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of things there, 2 different topics that we can cover probably in different webinars or things like that. But one of them was your AI scheduling. So how to leverage technology just in general as physical therapists. And then the other was just describing really business skills and things like that. Those are 2 topics that I would obviously like to cover in this webinar, but this is about telehealth, and we'll stick to that subject for now. But maybe we could come back to that in another webinar as well.
Definitely
jump on together there. So a couple more questions here. Todd Turner asks, telehealth residency? Are there residencies available for telehealth at this specific time?
Yeah, that's what we call ours. It's a telehealth mentorship and residency. And basically, there is nothing else out there that will actually allow you to do that in a, let's say, a really normalized, really, I don't know how else to say this, a really stiff, regimented residency, right? I am very free flowing and trying to adjust with any idea that somebody has, because you bring 10 different niche populations to our telehealth residency that we have, we're going to be able to deal with all of those. Now, it isn't just about the treatment, but there's going to be more and more individuals that start offering these, just as, being able to show somebody an orthopedic residency versus a women's health residency versus a pediatric. There's going to be a niche that pops up that's going to be telehealth pediatric residency. So I see those happening in the future. We just try and cover all bases by, in the back of our mind, we know that most people know how to treat patients. It's just kind of opening up and giving them that aha moment where they're like, oh, it is pretty much the same. I just have to do a really thorough subjective, or I need to look for these, red flags that might pop up that I then take that patient and say, you need to get in a clinic, and I'm going to do all the legwork to get you in a clinic. But once you're kind of over a few of those hurdles, a lot of people that have gone through our residency in the past, they really have this eye-opening moment. Like 2 weeks in, they're like, this is not hard. Like this is really, it's just a framework to kind of adjust your mind to. But other than that, there's nothing out there that I know of other than ours. But I'm not just like, oh, just go to ours. If anything else comes up, please let me know, because I'm vacuuming up every bit of information and getting people on the Telehealth 20 podcast that I have, where I love discussing these types of topics.
Yeah, and anybody out there, if you're not familiar with Rob is pioneering this industry for us. He's doing such an incredible job. He's always sharing the information with everybody, and he's truly genuine in what he's saying here. If people are popping up or know of other residency programs, please share them with him. If you share them with him, he will share them with others as well. This is truly a community feel thing here. Now, from what you've seen, because you're in the mix with telehealth, where are we in telehealth today in physical therapy, and where do you project that we will be in 5 to 10 years? Are there any settings that telehealth is more predominant now, and are there any settings that really don't have telehealth implementation in any way whatsoever?
Yeah, I would say the funny part is I would have thought that, like, okay, wound care, right? There's no way that you could do that. But Heather Flexer Ciasco is actually doing that. So she's a physical therapist that focuses on wound care. I think she has a big virtual conference that's actually coming up in the next, I think maybe next month or so. But definitely search out on that, because that was one thing that whenever she told me she was doing it, I was like, what? And then I was like, oh. And then she explained to me how, she would carry that through. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's not even only just for patients, but it's also for physical therapists that are not comfortable treating patients with wounds. So it's almost like she's looking over your shoulder and saying, yep, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. And she's providing that concierge service of just on the spot information with things that other physical therapists might not be comfortable with. But that's just one really good example of something that I was thinking, no way. But yeah, definitely there is. But
Yeah,
I would say pediatrics is a good one. It prevents a lot of drop-off visits, because the pediatric therapists are always trying to train the family members on how to do the things that the therapist is doing, so that the other 23 hours of the day, the family members know what to do, certain facilitations or handling skills or things like that. Women's health is a big one. Orthopedics, I do that all the time. So that's one that I think a lot of people, once they see me treat a patient, which I've done live and in those Facebook groups, that's something that kind of opens up the eyes of a lot of people in ortho, and they're like, oh, it's not all about my hands. It's like, no, this provides the shortcut for this. So if you can, make all the things that you need to make and appropriately teach the patient how to maybe even do some skill that is a little hands-on, but it gets them 75% better versus 0% better because they're 3 hours away from the closest clinic, that's a big step. As far as, I'm trying to really think of somebody that might be in a niche that does not or could not utilize telehealth. I would love for the audience to actually to bring up some things that they're like, oh no, that definitely wouldn't work. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm so dipped into it. I'm like, no, I could think of some way where it would work, you know. But as far as where we are in telehealth right now, I'd say we're probably at like I don't know, the second iPhone version, right? It was decent, and people were like, oh, this works really well. But it's still got some rough edges that we could clean up a little bit. I think when you look at the scheduling, definitely insurance and reimbursement for clinics that want to implement this. That's kind of some of the rough edges. So I'd say in maybe 2 or 3 years, we'll be a lot further ahead than most people thought that we would be. But I would say definitely in 5 years, everybody's going to be using this. You look at Athletico. Athletico just started implementing utilizing telehealth at the beginning of the year. And so if Athletico with 500 clinics is implementing telehealth, if you own a clinic in a city where Athletico is also at, you have got to up your game, or you are not going to be able to compete. So that is something to kind of keep in the back of your mind too, if you're a clinic owner or if you're a PT. you're going to know how to use this too. Because if you're working for Athletico now, they're going to roll this out to your clinic in the next few years too.
Yeah. Now, along that same line, do you know if there is or there are collaborative efforts where if you're on, let's say, a telehealth conference with a physical therapist, is there a way to, if you see these red flags or something that would be more medically oriented that a physician may be better off to answer? Are there any collaborative softwares or things
I
like that?
haven't. Yeah, that's a great question, man. I haven't seen any yet. There are platforms like you take Amwell, for example, right? So American Well, it's a telemedicine company, and they have a focus of nurse practitioners, doctors, sometimes PAs. They have physical therapy buried in their website, and they did a round of offering that as hiring physical therapists, and it was on a 1099 as needed basis, but still there was professionals that were all working for Amwell, but there wasn't any connections to take a patient that was, like you're saying, had some red flags that definitely could utilize somebody else to see that was a higher level professional that had more experience. There wasn't those little connection pieces happening. But the thing that I've found is there are companies like SteadyMD that I've talked to and that we're looking at implementing and starting this collaborative effort with something like a telemedicine system, and then utilizing our central patient hub digital.physio as almost that easy referral over to a physical therapist. But the reverse has not come about yet. It's usually just kind of, you hear those red flags, and I always tell everybody that we're training, you hear a red flag, you pretty much you send them off immediately. You don't want to chance it.
Right, and that makes sense. There may be some cases that you would just want to get a consult at that given moment so that you can continue your treatment if everything looks good. But there's also more times where safety first, and you don't want to chance it and send them on their way at that specific given time.
Yeah.
Now I have a great question here that I'm sure a lot of people want to know about from Simone Taylor. Are there any different documentation requirements for telehealth, or are documentation requirements more guided by if the practice is cash pay versus insurance?
Similar, yeah. So number one thing, always refer back to your practice act. Make sure there's nothing, special or hidden in your practice act. There might be one state out there that talks about documentation specific to telehealth versus in clinic. But the majority of the time, it's the exact same. So if you run a cash pay practice and you take notes via paper and you have them, securely stored, you're going to do the same thing with a telehealth visit. There is no specific documentation. Like myself personally, when I'm seeing telehealth patients, I'll just use paper, pen and paper. I don't like typing when I'm using this sort of a live video component, because a lot of times patients will be like, "Are you on Facebook? What are you doing right now?" But if they see you writing, you're not writing a letter to your grandma. You're writing about their subjective that you're trying to get from them, right? So it's fairly simple if you have that angle that I used, at least cash practice, and documentation was just pen and paper. And it was very simple. And at the end, I finish up the visit, write all my notes, write the date and time, the patient's name, tuck it away securely. And that's it. My documentation is done. I know that just blew 40 people's minds, but it can be that easy again, because that used to be 15 years ago, kind of that easy. So it's a little easier now.
Now, are there ways that Rakhi Singhal asked this question? Do you have to be licensed physical therapist for telehealth, or physical therapy assistants can also practice? Are there ways that physical therapy assistants can practice as well?
Yes, and the bad part is the state of Texas just passed a law basically saying telehealth is okay, but PTAs are not allowed to do it. And it's like scratching your head and you're going, what? So if by that logic, Texas should also, and I am not advocating for this, I'm just taking everybody on a logical ride here. If that's the case and PTAs can't see patients via telehealth, then at the same time, shouldn't they not be able to do home health visits? Because those PTAs are going to an individual's house by themselves. They do not have a supervising PT there, and they're providing treatment. So it kind of doesn't make sense when laws like that pop up. It makes me scratch my head. But I see in the future that that is going to probably not be the case in most states, because it's just going to create a reflective business model that shows, okay, telehealth And physical therapy in clinic, it's almost the same thing. So why do we need to reinvent the wheel? Because we really don't. It's just it's one of those little outliers that always makes me scratch my head why they did that. But PTAs should be able to see and adhere to the same rules and regulations and the same practice act statutes that we are now in clinic setting or a home health setting.
Now, here's a great question from Catherine Coleman, and we have essentially a two-sided marketplace here, right? We have to get the buy-in from the clinicians, from the physical therapy community, but we also have to get the buy-in from the patients. So, Catherine Coleman asked, have you noticed any difficulties with patient buy-in with telehealth?
Patients are ready. Patients are way ready to do this. I mean, the thing that would have been the difficulty was when I was doing this in my first few years, and you had the most difficulty that was probably the biggest challenge was people putting their credit card information online and paying for something online. Like that was a decade and a half ago, right? But nowadays, everybody gets stuff from Amazon. Everybody's used to getting things as fast as and as convenient as possible. So a lot of patients, whenever they find and stumble onto this type of service, they're ready. I mean, they're ready to go, especially high level professionals that don't have time to step out of their work environment 3 times a week, even twice a week, fight traffic and have, an hour commute, get there, do an hour, hour and a half of PT, go back to work. It's non-productive hours that sometimes people don't have the vacation time to take. So they're looking for something that fits their schedule in order to, a lot more people are living paycheck to paycheck. They're looking for how to get their needs met outside of normal work hours in a convenient fashion. So the patient population is there.
Yeah, I think telehealth is super exciting because I think it's going to remove a lot of waste from the system, a lot of cost from the system as well.
Tons. Yep.
And it's going to allow more people to get access outside those traditional means that aren't necessarily even not even just for PT, but even for physicians as well. Like you don't have to go to the ER if you've got a question.
Right.
You don't have to go see your general practitioner if you have a question. You just go on telehealth and you get this answered super quickly. So I'm excited about the future of it, and then especially the ways that we can incorporate it, implement it into PT as well, both as a if I'm a patient or as a clinician too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we have another great question here from Ramon Hamilton, which a lot of people are going to have questions about. CYA all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So what are liability insurance options and concerns for physical therapists offering telehealth services?
So most liability insurance, they cover telehealth as long as it is not excluded in your practice act. So like I said, Delaware's kind of that sticky situation that's a little one way or the other. But every other state and HPSO has a specific document that they've even put out stating that they do cover telehealth if it is something that is not it's not prohibited in your state for certain instances. As long as it's clear, you're covered because they treat this as the exact same thing as, you're working in the clinic, you're working in the patient's home, doing home health. Well, now it's just one more branch of your seeing patients virtually. So it's just a different distribution method, and they cover it the same.
So let's talk about timing here. Is this a good time for PTs to start getting involved, or is it really like not adopted completely yet, where people might want to wait a little bit for the future?
I would say if they wait until it's adopted, they missed out on a gold mine. I mean, basically, the patients, like I was just saying, the patients are there and ready to go. It is simply finding those patient populations. Now, granted, we are not talking about the 80 and 90-year-old individuals that are very used to going to physical therapy in the clinic. They've had multiple surgeries. We are talking about high-level professionals. We are talking about very busy individuals that have a full-time job that I think has been just a missed opportunity for our profession because that 7 to 12% that we see for physical therapy issues that are musculoskeletal related, that should be way higher. And so this is one of the reasons why is we're not meeting the patients where they're at. So by utilizing this sort of service and system, I think a lot of people are surprised. You tell them that you're doing it and they're like, "Oh, I'd love to do that." I mean, just ask the next 10 people that are kind of close to you and aren't going to give you that skewed opinion, but you kind of know them in passing. Tell them an idea about this that you're thinking of starting it and see what they say. I bet you will be surprised. If not, probably messaging me going, "Oh my gosh, when can I start?" because it will open your eyes to hear that.
Yeah, great point. I mean, you want to get ahead of the curve. If you're doing it when everybody's adopted it, you're already falling behind. You've lost
Yep.
market share. If you've got that entrepreneurial mindset, just go dive in. You're going to make mistakes in the beginning, but you're going to learn. And once you learn, you're going to be able to hit that nice curve and really set yourself apart in the market. And like you were describing before, companies like Athletico, larger companies are getting involved already. So you need to establish yourselves now because the future is here. It's not coming. The future is here. And probably both our recommendations. With anything, whether it's telehealth or whatever, get involved as soon as you can. You really don't want to be left behind, unless you do want to be left behind. I can't speak for everybody in the world.
But everybody who's watching this has a computer apparently, or a phone, so you're good.
A couple more questions here. So Orlando Bejarano, how about using telehealth for treating scoliosis if you're already accepting third-party payers at your clinic?
Ooh, that is a deep question there. So let's parse this out. If you're already accepting third-party payers, I would say that you need to check for parity in your state, and you need to basically call that insurance company and ask them. So number one, if you're in a parity state, okay, good. There's your first green light. Second thing you need to do is you need to call that insurance company and ask them what they cover for telehealth services in that state. Don't bring up physical therapy. Say, I know you're a parity state. What codes do I need to use? What hoops do I need to jump through? And start to establish. I tell most clinics that I consult with, you need to create a binder that is specific to telehealth, and each insurance company is going to have different hoops you need to jump through. So start there and then find out if that insurance company covers it. If they do, what hoops you have to jump through. Write all this down once. You'll never have to do it again. And then the third thing is make sure that patient's okay with it. So you can't just say, hey, we got benefit coverage. Go home. I don't want to see you anymore. Make sure that that patient is okay with it. And if they're okay with it, do a practice session. Like literally make sure that the tech is all hooked up with this patient and have them in another room and you're in another room. Just practice for 5 minutes so that you can have a successful first time that you attempt that. So those are that's how I would break down that scenario. And this is stuff that I talk with clinics all the time. So that could be a curveball for some, but I've heard this a lot.
Yeah, I love that advice of getting it essentially done in the other room so you can get people feeling comfortable with it, breaking down those barriers in a more controlled way.
Absolutely.
So actually diving into that, let's go really to the tactical level as well here. So what are digital physio and PT Live, and how do they work together to provide those telehealth services?
Yeah. So these two platforms that we have, the first one that we started about 4 years ago is ptlive.me. So if you look up PT Live on Google, you're going to find us real easy. That is a simple chat box that you can utilize and put on your website. And we give it away for free to solo clinicians and individuals who are just starting out their practice because we want them to grow to a bigger clinic, right? So our whole thesis is that patients are using technology more and more. And when a doctor hands them a script, they're not just going to go, oh, okay, I'll go there. People that are, I think the average age, like even 55, it's aging up and up. Those people are not that they're not as trusting, but they want to check and verify. So they're going to Google you, they're going to look on your website. And if you have the capability to connect with them immediately, not with a form, not trying to do a chat bot, they want that personal connection. It's as easy and it's almost the same as getting them in the door for a free consultation, right? People will do those free walk-in consultations, 15 minutes. Here's our clinic. Here's what we'll do. I'm the therapist. Hey, how are you? We have cookies on Friday, and they sign up for an eval, right? So instead of that, our thesis is that you're going to be able to do almost all of that virtually through a simple chat box that takes the patient from a text chat where you can just answer your phone, start answering via text, and then you can take them to a telehealth visit. So a live video component is right behind one button. Patient pushes it. You say, okay, I'm ready. And you're hopping on this just like Brett and I are right now. And then I can show him the clinic. I can show him our staff. I can show him our happy patients. And then that's easy. It was super convenient. They didn't have to drive to see you. And now you got a new patient. So we also included a scheduling component in that chat to where, again, they didn't have to leave the chat. Like we try and get them in, capture them, and get it done right there, all in one spot. So when we had this, we have over 500, and I think 513 when I checked this morning, 513 PTs that are signed up for this. I think we've easily got over 100 clinics signed up now that are mostly solo practitioners. But the ease of that is it makes it almost like a telephone system for your website. So that's the easiest way to put it. And it takes away all of the inconvenience of they call the front office, they yank one of the therapists out of the gym to answer those specific questions. Now the therapist has an angry patient because they're only getting 2 minutes of their time instead of 10. And so we figured that if we collectively allowed the clinics to also utilize our whole network of PTs to answer those high level questions that most patients are going to ask, the PT can answer those questions even if they don't work for your clinic. And then the PT can get paid as a referral fee. So we have ours is in a it's in a category called a referral service. So it's in the anti-kickback law that you can be a referral service and be fine. So we're utilizing and crowdsourcing other PTs to help when those clinicians are too busy and can't look at a text or answer it. And then we get other PTs to answer those questions, and still that clinic then gets a new patient. And so finally this year we took that whole concept, and I have to give a shout out to Tony Maritato because he has been on my butt years now saying you've got to create a central patient hub for this. So that is where digital.physio came in. So if you just type in digital physio in Google, we're the first result there. And all that is a simple central patient hub where patients can get 12 minutes of a free chat with a physical therapist. So it utilizes our crowdsourced 513 physical therapists that we have. And then it provides that 12-minute free consultation for these patients that literally never had a clue that they could talk to somebody this conveniently. We don't even make them sign up for an account. They pick their diagnosis, they pick the state that they're in so that we can match them first with a clinician that's in their state. And then they enter a first name, could be fake, could be real, we don't care. And then they hit chat and they're connected with a physical therapist. And so through those 12 minutes, the physical therapist is playing triage. They're figuring out, okay, does this person need to go to a clinic? Can I do a visit with them right now at whatever price I set inside my PT Live account? Or does that person need to go to an urgent care or back to their general practitioner because that back pain kind of sounds like a kidney infection, you know? So we make it very simple to be that central patient hub for patients to come and get information that they need without the friction of signing up for something or paying for something. And then from there, we provide the value and then get new patients in the door where they should go.
Very cool. So, I mean, I love that. For those of you who are listening closely, there was a lot of really good stuff there, and it starts with Rob's mindset. And this doesn't have to do with telehealth. This has more to do with entrepreneurship and just business in general, or really just like being a good person in general.
Yeah.
But you always think about that abundance mindset. How can I be helpful first? So what Rob pointed out in the first part was he's providing this free service to practices. And what is the reason for that? One, because it's a good thing to do, but the other side of it is because if these practices are growing, they're going to become customers of his. So everybody's going to grow together.
Yep.
And then the other side of the things that he was thinking about is how do we use leverage, the principle of leverage within the thought processes that we have here. So leveraging the community. He was talking about crowdsourcing, getting other people involved so that we can provide services in an easier way for the community. So besides telehealth, just great advice there in general. Just how can you apply those principles to your life in other way as well? Think through those thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, what is the reimbursement on this? What are the costs? And if someone is able to get a payer to pay through insurance, what are the reimbursements on that typically look like? And then on the flip side of it, how much do people have to pay out of pocket if they're looking for a service like this?
Yeah. So the insurance reimbursement, is that one of the questions, like just typical insurance reimbursement? It's supposed to be in a parity state, the exact same for the charges that you would bill for an in-clinic visit. So in a parity state, let's say like Colorado that has parity, and they're pretty good at making insurance companies pay 100% of a regular CPT code. So you are not, number one, please listen to me closely. You will throw your career in telehealth down the drain if you try to ever charge manual therapy for telehealth. Don't do that. But therapeutic exercise, therapeutic activities, neurological re-ed, those are going to be codes that you can charge. You also have the remote patient monitoring charge that people are going to have to dig in a little bit more to find out specifics about that. But in parity states, you can get reimbursed for insurance the same rate that you would get reimbursed for those charges in the clinic. So like I said, it's just getting that binder together and finding the loopholes, because some insurance companies, they try to put the brakes on some of this stuff by providing those, hurdles and loopholes that, oh, you didn't do this box, you didn't cross this T or dot this I, we're not going to pay you. So make sure you have that in place, and you should get reimbursement in parity states that are the same as being in clinic for the charges that you would charge. But as far as like the cash pay side, like myself personally, I'd charge $95 for an hour eval or hour treatment, either one. I keep them the same, and then $55 for a half hour. So it's a very digestible amount, because some people are paying that for a copay. So, what was that other half of the question? I think I missed that
No,
piece.
that was good. That also answers Grady from New Jersey's question about, do you have a schedule for telehealth that is posted, or do you work out fees per patient based on need and length of stay?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to. On the 2 calls that I had today, they were asking, well, should I make packages? My suggestion is to not make packages, because you want it very simple. You don't want the patient to have choice fatigue. And then here's the other thing. Your goal is to get that patient better as fast as possible. If you have a 6-visit package and you get them better in 4 visits, you now have to track 2 visits with 1 patient for eternity, right? So to make it as simple as possible, just do an individual 3 choices. Your eval, keep it the exact same length of time and the same rate as an hour long or a long treatment. That way there's no choice fatigue, and they actually only have 2 choices. And then you have that half hour or the short version, to where, some people just need a little bit of a follow-up, and a half hour can knock that out. But it's totally up to everybody.
Very cool. That's actually interesting, and it just brings me on a thought train that's similar, but or I guess related. Have you ever thought of having this for non-clinical cases where people are maybe looking for advice on performance or things like that, where potentially a model that you were just describing might be something that is viable?
Yeah, yeah. Our whole system is pretty rubber stamp ready. So the whole PT Live and digital physio model of having something that is the collection and provides a business service, but then utilizes and crowdsources those individuals and those businesses to provide a patient-facing service. I see this as something. If people haven't copied us yet, I just don't think they've listened enough, because it's a genius system and a genius service. And we've been approached by some associations that are looking for this sort of model to provide for their professionals. Not the APTA, but other associations outside of physical therapy. I will say that much.
Now, question from Ramon Hamilton. Is there an online resource to find out if your preferred video conferencing platform is HIPAA compliant?
Mm-hmm. So in order to find that out, you can simply ask them, or they should have all over their website something about HIPAA compliance with a BAA, or a business associate agreement, or I think Google calls it a business associates amendment or something like that. Um, they should be able to provide you with that, either upon request, or it might be an upsell package. For example, Zoom. Zoom is a platform that I use just for business meetings, but they cost $14.99 a month. And then if you go to the HIPAA compliant version, it's $200 a month. So it's a little more pricey, but they will provide you with a business associates agreement to make you quote unquote HIPAA compliant. But then you have cheaper options like Doxy.me, which is out there and it is HIPAA compliant. CoView is one of my favorites, COVIU.com. They're coming out with a HIPAA compliant version that, again, should be probably a quarter of the price of Zoom. So there's a lot of different options. And again, I'm going to refer back to that telehealth PT group. Hop in there and you'll just be flooded. Like, what's everybody using? And you'll have 30 answers by the end of the day. And you can say, I need a HIPAA compliant. And then you'll not only have the link to what that software is, but you'll probably have some good feedback and some discussions around that too.
You've been describing about these parity states for a while now in this talk.
Mm-hmm.
And Catherine Coleman asked a good question. Catherine, how do we find out more about parity states?
Yeah. So it should be a American Telemedicine Association link. If you go to Google and you type parity insurance reimbursement or parity telehealth, those 2 things as well, I think, should just simply pop up a link that's going to show you a map. It's going to have orange, blue, and light blue states, I think. It will show you a map of what are parity states and what are not. But just Google telehealth or telemedicine and Parity, Parity, and that will pull that up. It should be a link for the ATA, the American Telemedicine Association.
And we're coming to the end here. So where should people start if they want to get involved in telehealth? What is that specific starting point? Because that's what everybody always has a problem with, is getting started.
Yeah. So number one, I would head to, if you're on Facebook, and it does not mean you have to be. Number one suggestion, if you're already on Facebook, join that Telehealth Physical Therapy Providers Facebook group. It's going to be very useful. We have 3 questions to answer because we want to make sure we're not getting spammed with people that are either, developers or recruiters. So I do a very eagle-eye job of making sure that you're a physical therapist before you get in. So please answer those questions before you get in. The number 2 thing is a resource that we made simply because I was being selfish and I didn't have enough time to answer. The 5 questions a day became 10, became 20, became 100. And so I made telehealthpt.com with a lot of free resources on there. So those free resources include a starting video that's like an hour long, a lot of tips, a bunch of doctorate of physical therapy programs that I've presented to. They allowed me to record it and upload it. So you can see me doing presentations to students. I think there's like 5 or 6 of those on there. There's just a lot of useful info. I think it covers probably 85% of use cases, and it's all free. So if you hop over there, you're going to be able to get a ton of free information. This next Wednesday, I'm actually going to be starting our inaugural telehealth boot camp, which is pretty much just a thing where I'm going to show people my mindset and how I treat patients online. And then I'm going to demo with a live patient. That's going to be for the spine, the shoulder, the knee, and the hip. The majority of the ortho stuff you're going to see. So a lot of requests was out there for that. So as I always do, okay, let's do this. So I'm going to start that next week. That's going to be a 6-week program. So that's another good place to start. And if you want to get in there, and because I'm doing this, use Covalent Careers. I made a coupon code for that. Use Covalent Careers pretty much on any, I think there's like 3 or 4 paid things on Telehealth PT. It works for all of them. But like I said, everything that you're going to scroll down through, I say 90% of it's free. Use the free stuff. Join the Facebook group. You don't have to buy anything. If you use YouTube, the Facebook group, and Telehealth PT, the free videos, you're going to be able to start this just as easily as if you pay. So don't pay. Try and do it yourself first. When you hit those sticking points, get on my calendar and pick my brain for an hour. That's also free. And there's my beer opening up there. And so at the end of the day, yeah, exactly. My beer's telling me it's time. Wrap up, Rob. But that's where I would start, is you've got to start just by dunking yourself and immersing yourself in the knowledge and gathering that information so that you don't get tripped up and, somebody finds you and says, hey, I'll charge you $35,000 to get this done. Don't do that. Please don't. I've had people come to me and I'm like, do not do that. Please don't do that. So just learn all you can, get in the groups, surround yourself with like-minded individuals. Don't listen to the people that say it's impossible to do. Watch me do a free visit. It's easy. It's not hard, and it's not rocket science, guys.
Awesome. Rob, thanks so much. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch? I know you've been saying you don't like talking to people and everything, but
yeah.
If they want to get in touch, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on most social media at PT Live Guy. So PT Live and then GUY Guy. And then you can also just email me, rob@ptlive.me. And then that's it.
Great. I'm going to ask you to put some of these links that you've been referring to in the comments for this YouTube video. So if you're watching, you can see some of those helpful links in this YouTube video. We'll also have our team here send those links out to anybody who signed up for this YouTube Live via email. We can do that as well. And if there's anything else you need, you can also find me, Brett, B-R-E-T-T, at covalentcareers.com as well. Just shoot me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions that are outside of the scope of what Rob's talking about here, which is telehealth. If you ever have any career-related questions or anything that has to do with business, whatever it might be, happy to answer those questions for you as well. If no one has any final questions here, Rob, thanks so much again. Everybody, thank you so much for coming and listening to our webinar today. We really appreciate all of you. And to everybody out there, best of luck, and keep pursuing your dreams and keep on getting that information that's out there for you for free to help you do all those things that you want to do. Take care.